All right, so for the last panel of the night, we want to focus on how we can grow the esports and gaming community. We're about to hear it from the very best, Wim Stocks, CEO and General Manager of World Gaming, and ABG, who we've heard before as a moderator, GD MBA candidate and associate at Feminuity, as well as Cass Marshall, Polygon Sites lead. The panel will be moderated by Jack Benson Lee, a former top-tier StarCraft player. Please come on stage.
Hello, everybody. So I want to say thanks, Arena, for this wonderful opportunity. This is a dream come true to be amongst these amazing people. I got a chance to talk to a couple of you before we got started, and one of the common threads we have was actually StarCraft. Cass Marshall, actually your list of credentials is crazy. You've worked with Riot Games, PC Gamer. Now you're with Polygon, which is amazing. I think the first question I'd like to ask is just open up to you guys very general. I'd like to ask, what does a community in esports look like? What kind of activities it will have and needs, whatnot?
I think that's a great question. Right now, I think across all of esports and gaming in general, we're seeing basically several dozens and hundreds of types of communities just forming around central causes. Some of them are League of Legends players. You know, they've been playing League of Legends since beta. That's their game. Others people are really tied to an organization. You have TSM fans who are chanting TSM at tournaments TSM isn't even playing in. For them, that's their community. And for others, you have people who are there for the competitive skill and they're game agnostic. With initiatives like the Overwatch League and Fortnite, we're also seeing younger people getting into gaming at a more competitive level. We're seeing more women showing up in matches, being visible superfans, and we're seeing more people from LGBT markets also getting involved. So right now, I think you could find nearly any community under the sun in the esports right now. But I think a better extension of that might be, what sort of community do you want to build? Because the people are out there for you to find, build a community around. It's just a matter of sort of defining that, because right now it's so widespread.
So I think at a higher level, what the esports community really needs is what any community really needs, and that's generating a sense of belonging, and obviously making the doors to it accessible and inclusive so that as many people can participate as possible. And I think we always hear this kind of narrative about esports and gaming in general becoming kind of this like multi-billion-dollar industry. It's going to be huge. It's going to overtake traditional sports. And I think the only way that we can get there is if we make as many people feel included. If we make as many people feel like they have a place in esports, if we open the doors up, if we make participation easy for everybody, then that's the only way that we can get that kind of engagement needed to overtake, basketball, hockey, what have you. So I think that's really important.
Somebody scream back there. For our realm, which is both sort of general esports marketplace as well as the collegiate marketplace, it's clear that you can't. One size doesn't fit all when you're talking about building a community. Every game is different. Every game, you have to speak differently to the players. You have to speak differently to the participants. You have to speak the speak of that particular game. And one of the things we've had to do, and it's not easy, is to in our realm we have community managers that deal with a specific game. We can't be everything to everybody as much as we'd like to be, but we have 10 goals of game IP that we try and communicate to. We try and be part of. We use all sorts of different tools between Reddit and Discord to do so. But it's very clear you can't talk to a Madden player like you do to a Call of Duty player. You can't talk to a Counter-Strike player like you do to a Dota player. So that's an important recognition, And we have built our business around being as specific and as targeted to building communities as an individual game.
Absolutely. Amongst the three of you guys have so much experience in the gaming industry and have really, even speaking earlier, the depth of the history of gaming is huge. How do you guys think Beam is going to help with that narrative of building that community and facilitating that growth?
Oh, go ahead.
Free for all.
Yeah, free for all.
Well, I worked for Immortals, who are the owners of the Los Angeles Valiant and the Overwatch League, as a community manager. And I can say that right now, every esports team, every organization that has room to grow is really looking at offline events. That's because, first of all, you know, offline events really build a solid base. It converts curious people into fans, which converts them into super fans if you play your cards right. There's just one problem, that's overhead, right? You don't make a lot of money by having 300 people over to your house to eat all your stuff and watch your games. So they have to figure out, organizations need to figure out, and part of that is overhead. So Beam and apps like that, third-party apps, allow teams and organizations to expand and grow without having to sink those resources themselves. Because right now, I think every team wants the dedication of a fan base who show up to game night every single weekend. You know, they want the prestige of having a bar full of fans screaming at an Overwatch League match. It's just a matter of how do you make that happen. And I think Beam, and there are other third-party apps that teams have used for stuff like in-game analytics, but I think that shows, you know, the power of partnerships and working with apps.
I think what Beam does really greatly as a intermediary is that they kind of do the vetting process for you. So you know that these events are safe, they're accessible, they can accommodate for different people, like different disabilities, different dietary restrictions, different needs even for controllers and for kind of like the visual aspects of the game. And that's what Beam does really well, is that instead of you having to go and do this vetting process yourself, they already make sure that that safety component is there, so you can kind of trust the events that you're attending.
I think that one of the most valuable things Beam does is we're in a very, very unpredictable space. If you're in traditional sports, baseball season, you know the schedule almost 6 months in advance of the league even starting for the season. Think of the NFL. The NFL, you know, every Sunday from between the first week in September and the first week in January, there's a game on every Sunday from at 1 o'clock and at 4 o'clock and at 7 o'clock. And that's what's lacking in esports. Yet Beam is going to be extremely valuable in helping people understand when these events are being held, where they're being held. To me, it's one of the most important things. You can't, I think of all the Counter-Strike events going on around the world. Some majors crop up 3 weeks before, or they're announced 3 weeks before they usually happen. How do you plan for that? You can't. So Beam, the more tournament organizers can integrate with Beam and get the scheduling out in front of, and so people understand when they're that. That's, to me, is the most value that Beam can bring.
That's really cool. So diving a little more specifics, what kind of communities, what kind of groups can Beam help actually grow communities for? Would it be publishers? Would it be streamers? Like, what do you guys predict would be the biggest benefit in terms of different type of groups?
So what I see Beam really benefiting is specific demographics that might feel unwelcome at first. So for instance, in the Overwatch League, you'll see a lot of people go, oh, Houston Outlaw fans, they're a bunch of teenage girls, you know, compare them to pop band fans. And for that can be really intimidating. If you're, you know, a 16, 17-year-old girl trying to go participate in an esports community for the first time, and a platform like Beam goes, no, you're welcome, you're here, right? It also allows smaller communities that exist within a larger ecosystem to really sort of get out there. So for instance, at an LCS final, you'll often have streamer meetups, you'll have cosplayers, and sort of these smaller creators who are looking to get a foothold, you know, they have a way to link into these bigger events and sort of make their presence known.
Yeah, I think Cass brings up a really good point. I think with Beam being kind of like a leader in this space right now, there's such a need for more representation of people who aren't very visible in the gaming space. Whether it's women, whether it's people of color, whether it's the LGBTQ community. These aren't typically the people that are represented as gamers, at least not seriously. So what can we do, as a community to bring them forward, to feature them more, to hear their stories as kind of the new mainstream?
Those are both great comments and sentiments. The thing that I think, and I talk about this a lot, and I'll leave it to a number of panels, but the pro side of esports is now quite defined, and it's starting to clarify for so many people, for so many brands, what esports really is. When you think about the League of Legends franchise model, you think of Overwatch League, you think of NBA 2K. These are franchise models that now all of a sudden start to look a lot like traditional sports. What's missing in esports still, and where we are inserting ourselves, trying to insert ourselves, is this whole notion of how to become a pro. How do you get into an event? How do you play? How do you improve your skills? What's the mechanism? What's the feeder mechanism to, if you're an aspiring player and you want to get better, how do you do that? And I do think this whole notion of being able to curate and having Beam deliver through the app all these different opportunities and different events, and I think it's a very valuable part of building the infrastructure that is lacking in esports. Pro side, all great, but what's missing still is the feeder mechanisms, the infrastructure for players who want to get better. Now Beam can help curate that and can help communicate where these events are, what they're all about. If you're a Counter-Strike player, you can sort on Counter-Strike. If you're an Overwatch player, you can sort on Overwatch. That's a valuable tool set that Beam delivers.
So Cass and Amy, you guys both touched on this a little bit already, but how do you, from your observations, how do you feel women in the LGBTQ plus community are treated in the gaming and esports arena?
Yeah, I have a lot to say about that. Well, typically women and LGBTQ people are not made to feel very welcome in the esports or gaming space. Just as kind of like a personal anecdote, back when I used to game a lot when I was online, I would just completely mute my mic because there was just no way I was going to talk and out myself as a girl. There's no way I was going to, put a picture of myself on my DP. I was going to choose a very gender neutral gamer tag just to fly under the radar. And it's kind of these things that you don't really consider if you have the privilege of just playing in this space freely, that a lot of people don't have this privilege to kind of be themselves. They have to hide parts of themselves or be subjected to sexual harassment online or racial slurs or gay slurs, what have you, and that's all things that are going to impede who can become a pro player. Because if you can't play freely in this space, you're not going to get the practice you need to actually become a professional in this kind of industry. And that's also really unfair, and it creates a lot of barriers for people who would be considered minorities. So I think they're not treated very well currently, but obviously we can change that because we're so new right now and we're still writing a lot of the rules of this space. So obviously this isn't something that is set in stone. Everyone here in this room has a role in making sure that this becomes a really inclusive kind of community.
So that's a really great question. I apologize because I'm about to go off on a very complex answer, but for me, I got dial-up in my house when I was about 8 years old. I started playing StarCraft when I was about 10 years old with strangers online because, sure, why not, I was sort of one of the first generation of people who had regular access to not just the internet, but a competitive environment that was largely unmoderated. There were no toxicity filters like there are in Overwatch or League of Legends today. It was very much the Wild West of competitive gaming in a lot of ways. And that continued for many years. You know, I bought an Xbox with my first part-time job. And I took it home, and I got set up on live, and I immediately got cussed out in the lobby. So, you know, like, and I think you're starting to see another generation of gamers coming in, and you're gonna see some conflict, you know. I think a lot of the people who have been playing through thick and thin, the people who have, you know, maybe thrown slurs around or have been in lobbies where that happens, they might say, you know, of course anyone can play, we're totally fine with that, as long as you're fine with everything being as it is. You know, we're not going to make any arrangements for you. And I think that's something that needs to change, because I think obviously if you want to get more people into the space, if you want to make them feel welcome, that's going to be a huge thing. And I think that's something where that needs to come not just from leadership positions, but from everyone. If you're in a game with someone and a woman speaks on the mic, and the guy tells her to get in the kitchen, sometimes just like, hey man, not cool, can really do a lot. These small gestures, I think, are really going to help build a new infrastructure for getting people into the space. And you want to get people into the space. I mean, from a purely mercenary standpoint, I know so many women who bash out hundreds of dollars on custom Overwatch League jerseys, you know. They want to be here. They want to participate. So it's going to take some work, but I really think we have what it takes to make them welcome.
I heard that improves blood flow, so if you guys ever feel like clapping, go ahead. Wim, so for those that aren't acquainted, Wim was the former executive vice president of Atari Games. Like, I think most people would have stopped right there, but you then became a former executive vice president of Virgin Gaming, and now the CEO and GM of World Gaming and the CSL, which is like a huge part of my adolescence. Yeah, you can model my investment portfolio off of that StarCraft strategy. But so I feel like you're in a position where you could see where the game industry is going and have influence in that. So kind of leading off the former question, what needs to happen to see that cohesiveness of the community moving forward?
One of the things that I was going to chime in on this conversation, we are in every regard we're in the realm of being a tournament organizer. And two brands, World Gaming and we believe Starleague, very different models. World Gaming's more general market esports around tournament campaigns and content, and we have an online tournaments platform that enables us to bring in tens of thousands of players as part of a qualifying mechanism that then is culminating as live events. On the collegiate side, it's really a league operations administration event or dynamic. And one of the things that we've done, and we're not unique, and I don't think we're necessarily aggressive either, but we've established codes of conduct that you flame somebody, you make a homophobic remark, you make a misogynistic remark. Yeah, there's no 3 strikes, you're out. And we had an incident this year with NHL game, very male dominated game, and yet one of our tentpoles, and we had to banish a couple of the better players because they were just not being responsible and not being smart about what they're saying, what their conduct is, and there was no issue and no compunction at all for you're one of the best NHL players, but you're out. And thankfully we left it up to this player, but he came back and fully apologetic and understanding now which side of the bread his butter's on, and so we are backing, and I think everybody in this room and everybody in the realm of running esports terms has that obligation as well. So I don't know if I answered your question.
That was very cool. And I think actually, Cass and Amy, what were your thoughts about kind of having that? What has to happen for that cohesiveness to actually happen in the community?
So every time I talk about esports, I'm always reminded of the Far Side cartoon where there's this kid playing Mario and his parents are watching him and they're thinking of job listings, you know, looking for experienced plumber to save the princess, $500K a year, full health benefits. And you know, that ended up being strangely prophetic, and I think we've been talking a lot about pro careers, onboarding pro players, competitive players, and all of that's completely legitimate and a much needed topic to discuss. But I think something else is, there's more than just playing. You know, I am terrible at video games. I could play StarCraft with any one of our speakers and I would get demolished. But I still manage to make my living in this field. You know, there are commentators, analysts, coaches. You know, there are women in the Overwatch League. Susie Kim was general manager of the London Spitfire when they won their championship. You have Avala working as the first female coach in the Overwatch League. We have hosts like Seltzer and Shocks, and all of this matters, right? Like the more infrastructure you have and the more onboarding you have for various routes to success within the industry, and believe me, no matter what you're interested in, no matter what your skill set is, there's something for you. Video production, writing, editing, media training, PR, right? Like, and the more that we onboard to these positions, the more infrastructure we'll have, and that will help tremendously with getting more people of all sorts into the industry and having more to welcome them on.
Yeah, I think in terms of better cohesion in the community, Wim was talking about something really important, which was setting better community standards and standards of conduct. And when you kind of start off with that as the expectation, then that becomes the standard. Then any kind of microaggression, any kind of harassment, any kind of slur, that becomes absolutely unacceptable. So it's great that a lot of the decision makers in this space are changing their priorities right now, you know, because I remember a time, and probably a lot of gamers do too, when it used to be more egregious to, you know, use like a modded weapon than to call someone like a racial slur online. So you would get banned faster for using like a modded gun, but you know, you could throw out insults to people, you could bully people, you could harass people and never get banned. So I think right now, this community is truly progressing forward, and we're realizing, you know, what's more important than the integrity of the game is the integrity of the players. And we want to make sure that this is like an upstanding kind of industry, that everyone feels safe and they're not subjected to a hostile environment for no reason.
Thank you guys for sharing your thoughts. This question, I think a lot of people in the audience will be really interested to know. For anybody that's embarking on a career in esports, or trying to build a community, or just trying to get themselves into starting a company in esports, how can it make the challenge a little less impossible? For a lot of people in their minds, it seems a very difficult challenge to get their foot in the door.
Well, for me, I think something that really needs to be reflected is you don't need to be the next Overwatch League. You don't need to be the next LCS. I see so many, you know, young entrepreneurs go, I want to make a multi-billion-dollar grossing multiplayer game and run a franchise league about it. And I'm like, okay, great. That's not going to happen unless you win the lottery 7 times. So, but like, there are so many untapped niches in the industry right now. For example, Sea of Thieves, this very silly multiplayer cooperative focused game, suddenly launched a competitive mode, and suddenly they're doing tournaments, you know, they're setting this up. You have so many options, there are so many games, and more importantly, there are so many ways to present them. In World of Warcraft, you know, for 15 years, guilds have been competing to be the first one to kill a new boss at the end of a raid. In Battle for Azeroth, the most recent expansion, it's now a multi-million-dollar esport with sponsorships and Red Bulls involved, right? Like, these possibilities are anywhere, and I think something important to remember is at the heart of it, we're playing games, we're having fun. So if you're playing a game and it connects with you, you know, it can be anything. There are puzzle games that people have made esports out of. There are narrative games, right? You can build your passion off that. And just remember, like, if something sparks joy within you, that's worth pursuing, even if it means it'll be a smaller scale than the Overwatch League.
Yeah, I think what Cass was talking about earlier is really important. It's about finding ways to enter the space. It's not necessary that you become like the next ninja. Like you don't have to be like a top player to be successful in esports. Like all you have to do is find a need, right? So like why don't you start with finding some gap in the industry? Who are the people that aren't really being catered to, right? Can you create something that addresses different kind of like dexterity disabilities or visual impairments? What's something that you can make to help those kinds of people? So it's about kind of like opening up your creative mind and just trying to find out, okay, who is this industry not really made for? And what can I do to fill that space?
One interesting thing that's happening on the collegiate side is, as we're no different than the NCAA in terms of where we've set up leagues where players representing the schools play players representing other schools and put it into a league format, and pretty standard kind of stuff. But the smart schools are recognizing that it's not just participation that's important. The curriculum is really important. Developing esports curriculum, and that's not necessarily play. It's the business of and all the different facets of where the business is evolving, what's growing. Marketing, production, broadcasting, the whole notion of controllers in financial controllers in esports. So that's something that we've embarked on that will broaden this for esports participation. Won't necessarily be players, but it will be the business of. And all the smart schools are saying, wow, we want, as I think everybody in the room is aware, that players attracted to esports are some of the smartest STEM students on the planet: science, tech, engineering, math, and those schools that have awoken to this are using esports to recruit and to get players. And we just had our grand finals, our Final Four collegiate in Atlantic City, and I can't tell you the number of parents that walked up to me and said, my son wants to go to college that has an esports program. Which one would you recommend?